they call the golden age of movies, and a lot of the early films, John Ford's Green Was My Valley, and William Wellman's Oxbow Incident, and John Huston's Treasure Sierra Madre. All of those would fit in there.
Clint Eastwood. The name alone conjures images of gunslingers, hard-nosed detectives, and a Hollywood career that has stretched across more than 60 years. From small, uncredited roles in B-movies to becoming one of the most respected filmmakers alive, Eastwood has never stopped evolving. But here's the question. After a lifetime of unforgettable roles and acclaimed directing, which films does Eastwood himself hold closest to his heart? The answer might surprise you, because while the world knows him for westerns and tough guy classics, his own list of 6 favorite movies reveals a far more complex artist, one who values intelligence, humanity, and storytelling above spectacle. These are the 6 films Clint Eastwood loved the most, and why they mattered to him. Number 1. The Outlaw Josey Wales, 1976. When Clint Eastwood looks back over his towering career, one title always rises to the top of his personal favorites, The Outlaw Josey Wales. Released in 1976, this was one of the first westerns he directed, and many argue it was the first truly great one. For Eastwood, it wasn't just another western, it was a turning point, a film that captured both the brutality of vengeance and the redemptive possibility of family. Eastwood not only directed, but also starred as Josey Wales, a humble farmer whose life is ripped apart when Union militants murder his wife and child during the Civil War. That grief transforms him into a hardened outlaw, consumed by revenge, but along the way, he becomes something else, a reluctant protector for the downtrodden souls who gather around him. In Josey's journey, Eastwood found a canvas large enough to paint not only the violence of war, but the resilience of the human spirit. It addressed the divisiveness of war and how it can tear at heart and soul, Eastwood explained years later. But it also dealt with the rejuvenation of a cynic, reinstilling his life with purpose and with a surrogate family. This duality, vengeance and redemption, was what most impressed Eastwood about the project. He saw in Josey a man broken by violence, yet still capable of rebuilding himself, even if it was through a patchwork family of outcasts. At the time, Eastwood was already a star. The Dollars trilogy with Sergio Leone had made him an icon of the spaghetti western, and Dirty Harry cemented him as Hollywood's favorite anti-hero. But Josey Wales was something different. A deeply American western, rooted in the scars of the Civil War, and laced with a moral complexity few films in the genre dared to touch. It was also a film forged in controversy. Eastwood famously had producer Robert Daly fire director Philip Kaufman during production, stepping in to direct himself. The fallout was so intense that the Directors Guild of America created a new rule, the so-called Eastwood Rule, which prevents an actor or producer from firing a director and taking over. Yet despite the storm, Eastwood delivered a classic that critics and audiences embraced. The movie became a commercial and critical success, and decades later, Eastwood still calls it one of his best. He has admitted that Josey Wales is the film most often mentioned to him by fans on the street, a striking fact given the sheer weight of his filmography. For Eastwood, playing Josey allowed him to break new ground as an actor. Early in the film, in the scene where Josey grieves his murdered family, Eastwood delivered what was then the rawest, most vulnerable performance of his career. That emotional openness informed the rest of the story, softening the edges of a man otherwise defined by violence. Unlike traditional Western heroes, Josey doesn't ride into the sunset after killing his enemies. He builds something deeper. By the end of the film, he has surrounded himself with a surrogate family, Native Americans, pioneers, and misfits who symbolize the possibility of healing after devastation. This complexity was what Eastwood admired most. Josey Wales wasn't about one-dimensional revenge. It was about the cost of violence and the fragile chance of redemption. Nearly 50 years later, the outlaw Josey Wales remains one of Eastwood's most admired films, both by audiences and by Eastwood himself. Critics see it as the bridge between his earlier Leone westerns and his later masterpiece, Unforgiven. It's revisionist in spirit, stripping away the romantic myths of the Old West and replacing them with grit, sorrow, and humanity. Eastwood has said, "It came out in the 70s when the country was restless about Vietnam." It wasn't just a Western. It was about division, healing, and the search for purpose. That's why it still matters. That's why EL's actors like Morgan Freeman have even called it the best movie Eastwood ever made, praising its atmosphere, performances, and daring themes. Whether it's his greatest work or not, there's no denying that The Outlaw Josey Wales was a monumental film in Eastwood's career, the one that showed he could direct with as much force as he acted. Number 2. Bird, 1988. Of all the films Clint Eastwood has directed, Bird may be the most surprising pick when he lists his personal favorites. Released in 1988, the biopic about legendary jazz saxophonist Charlie "Bird" Parker was a sharp departure from the westerns and crime dramas that had defined his image. Yet for Eastwood, a lifelong jazz devotee who had seen Parker perform live in the 1940s, Bird was one of his most personal projects. "It was a nice story about someone whose musicianship I admired so greatly," Eastwood told the Associated Press. "It was a good script on the analysis of the self-destructiveness of personality, people who insist on sinking into the abyss. Success, being idolized by other musicians, none of it was enough." Eastwood directed the film with a style that mirrored its subject, improvisational, unpredictable, and emotionally raw. Rather than offering a neat chronological biography, Bird moves fluidly through Parker's turbulent life, his prodigious rise, his genius on stage, and his battles with addiction and self-destruction. Casting Forrest Whitaker as Parker proved inspired. Whitaker's performance captured both Parker's brilliance and his torment, earning him critical acclaim and the Best Actor award at Cannes. The film itself won Eastwood the Golden Globe for Best Director, cementing his reputation as a filmmaker willing to take risks well outside his perceived wheelhouse. People who insist on sinking into the abyss. There's something compelling about that, Eastwood reflected, explaining why Parker's story fascinated him. For Eastwood, Bird was more than just a film. It was a chance to channel his lifelong passion for jazz into cinema. Long before he was a Hollywood star, he was a teenager sneaking into clubs, listening to Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. That deep admiration for the music shines through in every frame of Bird. The film didn't make much money at the box office, but Eastwood never measured its worth in dollars. What mattered to him was telling the truth of Parker's life, even if it was messy, painful, and unconventional. In many ways, it showed audiences a new side of Eastwood. Not just the cowboy or the cop, but the artist drawn to stories of fragility, obsession, and genius. While critics praised Bird as a bold and soulful work, audiences were less certain. Its length and non-linear structure made it a challenging watch. But for Eastwood, that was part of its power. "It wasn't meant to be commercial," he later admitted. "It was meant to be honest." And in that honesty, Eastwood found one of his proudest achievements. Bird remains a testament to his versatility as a filmmaker and to his belief that cinema, like jazz, is at its best when it risks improvisation. For Eastwood, Bird wasn't just a film about Charlie Parker. It was a reflection of his own artistic philosophy, that true greatness lies in authenticity, even if it comes at the cost of comfort or convention. Number 3. Unforgiven, 1992. When Clint Eastwood talks about his favorite films, Unforgiven is always near the top of the list, and for good reason. Released in 1992, the film didn't just revive the Western genre, it redefined it for a modern audience. Eastwood directed, produced, and starred in the project, playing William Money, a retired gunslinger drawn back into violence against his better judgment. The result was a masterpiece that earned 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for Eastwood, and is now regarded as one of the greatest westerns ever made. "I loved the Unforgiven script," Eastwood said. "You had to get a ways into it before you knew who was the protagonist and who was the antagonist. Even the villains, with the exception of the renegade cowboys, had good points to their character and had dreams. Little Bill just wanted a peaceful life. He believed he was doing the right thing." The film dealt with issues, gun control, and the struggles people have within. The hero went against instinct. It was a very rich story involving loyalty to friends, family, and rationalizing deeds. It was a very intelligent script. At its core, Unforgiven is a story of revenge. But unlike the romanticized shootouts of classic Hollywood westerns, Eastwood's vision stripped away the myth and exposed the brutality. As William Money, Eastwood gave one of the rawest performances of his career. A broken man haunted by his past, reluctant to pick up the gun again but driven by loyalty and survival. The supporting cast elevated the film even further. Gene Hackman delivered an unforgettable performance as Little Bill Daggett, a sheriff convinced of his own righteousness, earning him the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Morgan Freeman brought quiet strength as Money's old friend Ned Logan, and Richard Harris lent his trademark gravitas to the role of English Bob. Eastwood saw the screenplay by David Webb Peoples as more than just another Western. It was a meditation on morality, violence, and the cost of choices. The script was very intelligent, Eastwood explained. It dealt with issues, gun control, loyalty to friends, the struggles people have within. The hero went against instinct. That's what drew me to it. For Eastwood, Unforgiven was also personal. Having built his career on spaghetti westerns with Sergio Leone and tough guy roles like Dirty Harry, this film allowed him to step back and deconstruct the myths he had once helped build. It was a western for an era disillusioned by violence, offering no easy heroes and no clean endings. Unforgiven wasn't just a success. It became a landmark in cinema. It grossed over $159 million worldwide, won 4 Oscars, and cemented Eastwood as one of the few actors-turned-directors to achieve equal greatness behind the camera. More importantly, it solidified his place as the man who could both embody and critique the cowboy archetype. To this day, Eastwood reflects on the film as a turning point. It wasn't just about gunslingers or revenge. It was about what it means to grow old, to live with regret, and to face the weight of one's past. "The objective," he once said, "is to make everything sound like the first time it's said." And in Unforgiven, every line, every silence, and every shot feels exactly that. Fresh, immediate, and unforgettable. Number 4. Mystic River, 2003. Clint Eastwood has always been drawn to stories that confront morality in its rawest form, and few films in his career capture that as starkly as Mystic River. Released in 2003, this neo-noir crime drama was adapted from Dennis Lehane's acclaimed novel and brought to the screen with Eastwood's signature restraint. The result was a film that was unflinching, deeply unsettling, and in Eastwood's own words, a meditation on how sometimes fate deals a bad hand, and it just keeps getting worse and worse, and there is nothing anyone can do. Eastwood not only directed the film but also composed the score, his first ever soundtrack composition, making Mystic River one of his most personal projects. At its core, Mystic River is about 3 childhood friends, Sean, Kevin Bacon, Jimmy, Sean Penn, and Dave, Tim Robbins, whose lives are shattered by a childhood trauma and then bound together again by a tragic crime decades later. What follows is not a tale of neat resolutions or heroes prevailing, but a grim spiral where grief, guilt, and suspicion consume everyone in its wake. Eastwood saw in the story a universal tragedy. "I liked the book and the screenplay by Brian Helgeland," he explained. "The way sometimes fate deals a bad hand, and it just keeps getting worse and worse, and there is nothing anyone can do. No amount of sane advice can stop the train. That fatalistic view gave Mystic River its chilling authenticity, the sense that the past never really disappears, and that trauma leaves scars no justice can heal. One of the film's greatest strengths was its cast. Sean Penn delivered a powerhouse performance as a father consumed by rage after his daughter's murder, earning him the Academy Award for Best Actor. Tim Robbins, as the haunted Dave, gave a devastating portrayal of a man broken by childhood abuse, and he too was honored with an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Kevin Bacon, Lawrence Fishburne, Marcia Gay Harden, and Laura Linney rounded out the ensemble, bringing gravitas and tension to every frame. For Eastwood, directing such a cast was an exercise in trust. He gave them space to explore their characters' complexities, letting silence and small gestures carry as much weight as dialogue. The result was a film that felt lived in, heavy with unspoken history. What sets Mystic River apart in Eastwood's body of work is its refusal to offer easy answers. There are no clean moral victories, no cathartic resolutions. Instead, there is inevitability, fate grinding down on every character. The way sometimes fate deals a bad hand, Eastwood reflected, and it just keeps getting worse and worse, and there is nothing anyone can do. That quote, more than anything, reveals what drew him to the story, its relentless honesty. He admired Lehane's narrative for refusing to flinch, and he respected the screenplay for giving him the chance to explore humanity at its darkest. Mystic River was both a critical and commercial triumph, earning 6 Oscar nominations and cementing Eastwood's reputation as one of Hollywood's most fearless directors in the 2000s. But beyond the awards, it holds a special place in his heart because of the themes it allowed him to explore: trauma, destiny, and the moral ambiguity of justice. Number 5. $1 Million Baby, 2004. Only a year after Mystic River, Clint Eastwood returned with another towering achievement: $1 Million Baby. On the surface, it looked like a classic sports drama, a weathered trainer taking on a determined underdog fighter. But under Eastwood's direction, it became something far more profound. The film was not about triumph in the ring. It was about love, sacrifice, and the unbearable weight of choices no family ever wants to face. Eastwood starred as Frankie Dunn, a grizzled trainer who reluctantly takes on Hilary Swank's Maggie Fitzgerald, a waitress-turned boxer with relentless drive. Their relationship begins as a mentorship, but grows into something deeper, a surrogate father-daughter bond between two people who had lost those connections in their own lives. It appealed to me because it was a story regarding family, Eastwood explained, a search for the daughter he never had a relationship with, and the search for the father that was no longer there for her. That simple idea gave the film its emotional spine. What began as a story about boxing transformed into a meditation on found family, loyalty, and ultimately, the morality of euthanasia. The movie struck like a thunderclap. It grossed more than $216 million worldwide and swept awards season, winning 4 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director for Eastwood, Best Actress for Hilary Swank, and Best Supporting Actor for Morgan Freeman. 7 nominations in total cemented its place as one of Eastwood's defining works. But for Eastwood, the accolades were never the point. He admired the film because of the way it forced people to wrestle with questions bigger than boxing. They were both sort of reticent, Eastwood reflected, and ended up putting themselves through the most emotional test possible, ending with her desire to be euthanized. It was a story that asked audiences not for applause, but for reflection. Few films in modern cinema close with a scene as devastating as $1 Million Baby. When Maggie, paralyzed from a catastrophic injury, begs Frankie to end her suffering, Eastwood staged it with unflinching honesty. There were no speeches, no easy answers, just the quiet horror of love expressed through an unthinkable act. For Eastwood, this was the heart of the film. It wasn't about a victory in the ring, but about the impossible choices that define what it means to care for someone. "It was a very rich story," he said, "involving loyalty to friends, family, and rationalizing deeds. More than any trophy or headline, what Eastwood admired most was the film's ability to move people. It forced audiences to look inward, to ask what they would do in Frankie's position. It blurred the line between grit and tenderness, between strength and vulnerability. By co-producing, composing the score, directing and starring, Eastwood poured every part of himself into the project. The result was a masterclass in filmmaking, an underdog story that refused to play by the genre's rules. Today, Million Dollar Baby stands alongside Unforgiven as the film that most fully encapsulates Eastwood's philosophy, that cinema should not only entertain but also confront life's hardest truths. Number 6. Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006. In 2006, Clint Eastwood did something few American directors had ever attempted. He told the story of World War II through the eyes of Japanese soldiers. Letters from Iwo Jima, released as a companion to Flags of Our Fathers, wasn't just another war movie. It was an act of empathy, a bold reimagining of one of the bloodiest battles of the 20th century. Where Flags examined the American perspective, Letters turned the lens around, focusing on the defenders of Iwo Jima, men who entered battle knowing they would almost certainly never return home. Eastwood explained why the story mattered to him. "I was proud of Letters from Iwo Jima. I got the idea of doing it while working on Flags of Our Fathers. That film was about the American invasion of the island, but I thought, what must it have been like to have been one of the defenders? To be told not to plan on returning home. What a difficult request to make of people." For Eastwood, it wasn't about heroes and villains. It was about human beings trapped by circumstance. They were facing certain annihilation, he said. They never gave up hope. A lot of them would have loved to have been out of the war and home, just like soldiers from any nation. At a time when Hollywood often painted World War II in black and white, Eastwood blurred the lines. The Japanese soldiers of Letters from Iwo Jima weren't caricatures. They were fathers, sons, and dreamers, caught in a storm they couldn't control. This perspective was revolutionary. An American director choosing to humanize the enemy in such a pivotal battle was a risk, but Eastwood wasn't afraid of breaking convention. As he put it, his goal was always truth. The objective is to make everything sound like the first time it's said. That freshness extended to the entire film. Told in Japanese, with a cast led by Ken Watanabe as General Kurabayashi, Letters immersed audiences in the lived experience of soldiers who knew defeat was inevitable. While Flags of Our Fathers was admired, it was Letters from Iwo Jima that truly resonated with critics and audiences. The film won the Academy Award for Best Sound Editing and was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, and 2 other Oscars. More importantly, it cemented Eastwood's reputation as a filmmaker willing to challenge national narratives. By pairing the 2 films, Eastwood revealed the futility of war from both sides. But it was Letters, somber, intimate, and unrelentingly human, that stood out. It wasn't about victory. It was about loss, dignity, and the shared humanity of soldiers everywhere. For Eastwood, Letters from Iwo Jima remains one of his most important works because it gave a voice to those history often silences. It reminded audiences that war isn't just fought by nations, it's suffered by individuals. It was, in his words, about showing that the soldiers on both sides are often just pawns in a game they didn't choose to play. That truth, stripped of nationalism or sentimentality, is what makes Letters from Iwo Jima not only one of Eastwood's favorites, but also one of his most hauntingly timeless films. Across 6 decades and 6 unforgettable films, The Outlaw Josey Wales, Bird, Unforgiven, Mystic River, Million Dollar Baby, and Letters from Iwo Jima, Clint Eastwood has shown the world that storytelling can be as tough as a bullet or as fragile as a whisper. Each movie reveals a different side of the man. The cowboy, the jazz lover, the moral philosopher, the chronicler of grief, the architect of family tragedies, and the humanist willing to give voice to the enemy. Together, they aren't just favorites. They are the roadmap of a career built on risk, honesty, and resilience. But what about you? Which of these 6 films do you believe best defines Clint Eastwood's legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take. And if you enjoyed this journey through the highlights of a Hollywood legend, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more deep dives into the lives and careers of cinema's greatest icons.